Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today is May 7th, 2025, and something interesting is happening. Bitcoin's price. It's actually climbing.
Yeah, which is surprising given the rest of the crypto market is kind of dipping slightly.
Exactly. So let's try and unpack that. Our mission today is really to get under the skin of the key movements and, the political currents shaping crypto and digital assets.
And we're using that blockchain XB.MP3 audio source as our guide for this, right?
That's the one. We'll be looking at the upcoming FOMC meeting, the political split, right versus left on crypto, what's happening with Samurai Wallet, and updates from Dubai and the Middle East.
It's definitely a bit of a mixed bag out there. Bitcoin up, but the overall market cap down, less DeFi action.
And stablecoins still holding strong, so quite a bit to get through.
That Bitcoin move is fascinating, though, isn't it? Against the grain like that. Makes you wonder, is it something specific driving demand just for Bitcoin right now?
Good question. Maybe some decoupling happening. Okay, let's jump into the big one everyone's watching, the FOMC meeting.
Oh, yes, Jerome Powell. The interest rate decision. Always a market mover.
And President Trump's been pretty vocal, hasn't he? Wants rates lower.
He has. And, well, the general thinking is lower rates could be pretty bullish, right, for stocks and potentially for crypto, too.
Yeah, makes sense. Lower rates often mean risk assets look more attractive, less cost to borrow, maybe more capital floating around.
And Trump adding his voice definitely throws a political angle onto what's usually seen as, purely economic.
Right. So the announcement time is 8 a.m. Eastern. That's 10 p.m. Gulf Standard Time for listeners over there.
Okay.
Now, the source we listened to had an interesting tip. Watch the announcement directly on the Federal Reserve's YouTube channel.
Bypass the potential media spin.
Exactly. The idea is mainstream narratives can sometimes, slant things, especially with complex topics like this.
That's actually good advice in general, isn't it? Especially in crypto. Go direct to the source when you can. Get it unfiltered.
Mm-hmm. So let's walk through the potential scenarios our source laid out. First up, rates stay the same.
Okay, what's the expected impact there?
Potential downward pressure on Bitcoin and crypto. Not necessarily because the facts demand it, but the media narrative might frame it negatively.
Right, like, inflation's still a worry, or maybe something about tariffs, even if the underlying data is okay.
Exactly. It's often about the story that takes hold, not just the raw numbers.
That's so true. Market sentiment can really disconnect from fundamentals in the short term. A rate hold might also signal, longer-term inflation concerns from the Fed's perspective.
Okay, scenario 2. A rate cut. Powell surprises everyone and cuts.
Now that would likely be seen as bullish.
Very bullish. The source suggests a significant pump, maybe even pushing Bitcoin towards a new all-time high.
Yeah, that fits the pattern. Cheaper money, more risk appetite. Crypto often benefits. Talk of a new ATH shows how strong that reaction could be.
And the third possibility, maybe less likely, but still there, a rate increase.
Ooh, that would be a shock.
A big one, according to the source. Bad for the U.S. economy and likely a sharp, significant drop for Bitcoin and crypto prices.
Yeah, tightening policy unexpectedly. Risk assets usually get hit hard. Investors would likely run for safety.
Now, interestingly, the source also mentioned some positive U.S. economic data under Trump. Employment up in April, unemployment steady at 4.2%, inflation down in April.
But the claim is that this isn't getting much airtime in the mainstream media.
That's the contention, yeah, that maybe these positive points are being downplayed.
Well, it shows how data can be framed, doesn't it? Different outlets focus on different things, tell different stories. Always good to look around.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Politics and crypto.
Right. The general vibe, according to the source.
It seems right-wing ideologies tend to be, more favorable towards Bitcoin and crypto. Left-leaning views, generally more cautious or even against.
That often tracks back to core beliefs, doesn't it? Views on government control, free markets, decentralization, versus, say, consumer protection and inequality concerns.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got some great examples. Positive side, Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire.
Hampshire in the source.
Right, New Hampshire. Signed a law letting the state invest in crypto and precious metals. First state reserve to do so.
Wow, that's significant. A state actually putting crypto on its balance sheet, essentially.
State Rep Keith Tam said it's about embracing innovation, hedging inflation, and the Satoshi Action Fund gets a mention for supporting these kinds of policies.
So you're seeing real political organization and advocacy paying off there. It signals growing acceptance, at least in some circles.
But then, flip side, Arizona. Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs vetoed a similar bill.
So the opposite outcome there.
Yep. And it got some strong reactions.
Yeah.
Wendy Rogers saying, Bitcoin doesn't need Arizona, but Arizona needs Bitcoin.
Yes, strong words.
Anthony Pabliano questioning the governor's grasp of investment. And a crypto lawyer, Andrew Gordon, stressed needing officials who actually understand crypto's future.
That really highlights the divide, doesn't it? The veto likely reflects concerns about volatility, risk, things often emphasized more on the left. And the Bitcoin crowd is obviously very convinced of its value.
Okay, let's hop over to the UK. Labour Party, generally left-leaning,
Their stance?
against strategic Bitcoin or crypto reserves. Economic Secretary Emma Reynolds apparently said at a summit, quite clearly, they don't see Bitcoin as appropriate for a market like the UK's.
Appropriate. That's interesting phrasing. Suggests a fundamental disagreement on its role or maybe concerns about regulation, illicit use, that sort of thing.
Whereas the Conservative Party is seen as generally more positive.
Yeah.
And Nigel Farage gets name-dropped as being pro-Bitcoin and influential.
Again, mirrors that right-left tendency. Conservatives often more market-oriented, maybe more open to financial tech, and Farage certainly has a loud voice in UK politics.
Okay, now for something really interesting. The Samurai Wallet case. U.S. versus Ken Rodriguez and William.
What's the latest there?
It looks like federal prosecutors under the Biden administration allegedly held back some key evidence.
Held back evidence? What kind?
Evidence apparently showing that FINICEN, that's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, didn't actually classify Samurai Wallet as a money service business until August 2023.
Okay, and why is that date important?
Because the charges against Rodriguez and William were filed way before that, in April 2024. And this FinCEN info only came out in April 2025.
Wow. Okay, so if FinCEN didn't see them as a money service business, which has specific anti-money laundering rules until after the charges, that potentially undermines the basis for those charges, right?
That seems to be the argument. A money service business, or MSB, has pretty strict regulatory duties if they weren't considered one until later.
Then were they actually breaking the law at the time they were charged? Big question.
Yeah.
And the delay in disclosing that info raises due process concerns.
Exactly. The defense lawyers are calling it a violation, saying it hurt their bail arguments, their whole strategy.
Makes sense. What are they asking for?
So the charges to be dropped. They're pointing to a new DOJ policy, the Blanche Memo.
Ah, the Blanche Memo. That gave updated guidance on prosecuting crypto mixers, especially around licensing, didn't it?
That's right. So the defense is saying under this current DOJ guidance, maybe Samurai's actions before August 2023 wouldn't even qualify as running an unlicensed MSB.
This could be a really important case then, setting a precedent for crypto privacy tools and how regulations are applied, especially when the rules themselves seem to be evolving.
And the source, just to note, frames this whole situation as potentially showing the Trump administration as being, perhaps, more open or fair on crypto privacy compared to the Biden DOJ's actions in this specific case.
It's always tricky comparing administrations directly, but the timeline, the alleged withholding, then relying on a newer policy, it definitely creates a narrative about shifting approaches to crypto privacy.
Okay, let's move over to the Middle East now. Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Seen some real action there.
Yeah, that region's been making a lot of crypto headlines. What's new?
Starting in Abu Dhabi, a company called BJAX got in-principle approval from the ADGM regulator.
ADGM, Abu Dhabi Global Markets. That's a well-respected regulator. So in-principle approval. That's a big step towards getting fully licensed, right?
Exactly. They're aiming to offer institutional-grade trading in custody in the MENA region.
Institutional grade. So focusing on the big players.
Seems like it. The focus is apparently on secure custody, trust, transparency, aiming to boost institutional adoption there.
Makes sense. Institutions need that security and regulatory clarity above all else. Who's behind BJAX?
Co-founders are Omar Abbas and Adam Ferris. They're stressing regulatory and security standards, positioning themselves as a kind of bridge, between Wall Street and the MENA crypto market.
That's a smart position. The MENA region has huge crypto transaction volumes already, if they can be the trusted institutional gateway.
Yeah. They're planning secure fiat on-off ramps, deep liquidity, advanced trading.
All the key ingredients.
Plus Fireblocks integration for security and even insurance coverage. They're aiming to launch later this year.
Fireblocks is a big name in institutional custody. And insurance. Definitely ticking the boxes for attracting serious capital. Sounds promising.
Okay, now over to Dubai. The Dubai financial market, the DFM, has launched something called Share Insights.
Share Insights? What's that?
It uses AI, artificial intelligence, to simplify company disclosures for investors.
Oh, interesting. So AI summarizing those long, dense company reports.
Basically, yeah, summarizes announcements, gives financial snapshots, revenue, profit, EPS, things like that.
That could be really useful, making investing less intimidating, maybe.
That's the goal. Cut down the time needed to analyze stuff, make it easier, especially for younger or first-time investors. Taps into the demand for digital tools in the region.
Yeah, I can see that being popular. Democratizing information access a bit, it fits that global trend of trying to simplify investing.
The CEO of DFM and Nasdaq Dubai, Hamed Ali Hareb Al-Moheri, mentioned that the global shift to simpler investor experiences.
Makes sense.
And it follows their revamp of the iVest app last year. That app now does IPO subscriptions, private offerings, fund transfers, live tracking.
So they're building out a whole digital ecosystem for investors there.
Looks like it. The app apparently has a lot of users already, so adding AI tools like Share Insights seems like a logical next step for usability.
Definitely embracing tech to improve the user experience. Smart move.
All right, finally, let's do a quick snapshot of the global crypto market right now.
Okay, lay the numbers on us.
Total market cap is around $2.91 trillion. That's down just under 1% in 24 hours.
Okay, slight dip overall, as we mentioned.
Total volume, also down a bit, around $65.85 billion. DeFi volume is lower, about $5.8 billion, which is less than 9% of the total. TVL in DeFi is hovering near $99 billion.
Uniswap's still leading the DFX volume.
Yeah, $1.77 billion there. But look at stablecoins. Volume is massive, $63.72 billion.
Wow, that's like almost 95% of the total.
94.75%, yeah. Tether USDT is leading it with over $51 billion.
That really shows where the activity is, or maybe where money is parked, waiting. Huge stablecoin dominance.
Bitcoin's market cap is around $1.87 trillion. Ethereum's at $213 billion.
In Bitcoin dominance.
64.46%. That's a 4-year high.
Really cementing its lead there. Ethereum's dominance.
About 7.3%. So big gap.
Interesting. And NFTs. Any shifts there?
OpenSea seems to be back in the lead for marketplace share, around 44%. Blur is second at about 28-29%. Maybe those SEC actions and then the withdrawal helped OpenSea regain some ground. Hard to say for sure.
Could be. The NFT space is always shifting. And key prices.
Bitcoin, as we said, showing strength around $97,236, up about 3% in 24 hours.
Nice jump.
Ethereum's at $1,834, up nearly 2%. Ripple XRP is at $2.15, up 2% today, but still down over 3% for the week.
Got it. So Bitcoin leading the charge today despite the broader market softness.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up this deep dive. We've covered quite a bit.
We have. The uncertainty around the FOMC, definitely a key thing to watch.
Then that clear political split on crypto adoption we saw in the US and UK examples.
Yeah, very different approaches. And the Samurai Wallet case raising those important questions about privacy, regulation, and due process.
And on the flip side, those positive developments in the Middle East, Abu Dhabi and Dubai, really pushing forward with digital assets and frameworks.
It really highlights the contrast, doesn't it? How different places, different ideologies are tackling crypto. From proactive adoption and building infrastructure, like in the UAE, to more caution or even resistance elsewhere.
It's a really diverse global picture that's constantly changing.
Absolutely.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. How is this mix global economics, clashing political views, and fast-moving tech like AI simplifying finance? How is all that going to keep shaping digital assets? Not just the price, but how they weave into our lives.
And what do these very different approaches we talked about today actually signal about the future? You know, the future of financial freedom versus financial control in this increasingly digital world.
Lots to think about there. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.